All right, in this video, we're going to talk about some educational learning theories and how those relate to activities or ideas that you might have about setting up the way your classroom is going to run. So the first person we're going to talk about is Skinner, and he was an educational psychologist in the late 1930s. He did other kinds of psychology too, not just education. But his idea was basically if you teach your students a skill and then you give them a test on that skill, if they score well on the test, that's like a reward and they're going to want to continue scoring well and they're going to continue working hard. And if they score poorly on the test, that's like a quote unquote punishment and they're not going to like it. And so they're going to change what they're doing so that they can do better on the next test. So it has some merit, it has some problems. He did not take as much of intrinsic, um, internal motivation into account. It was all very external, but external rewards and punishments do work. So, an external reward I know that worked when I taught high school was I would put stickers on my students' paper. And you might think for high school that's very childish, but I'm going to tell you, these 16 and 17-year-old big old football playing boys were wearing those stickers on their shirts. They were so excited to get a sticker. It became a mark of greatness almost to get one of these stickers. Now, I will say when I tried that with my eighth graders, they're still in that stage where they don't want to be treated as children, but they're not really old enough not to be treated as children. So it's a very awkward stage. And when I put stickers on their papers, they were not at all interested in it. I had to find a different reward that worked for them. So you basically have to look for the reward that matters to your students and then provide that reward. So one thing I did when I taught eighth grade, I had a snack box. And if you did every time you turned in a homework assignment, I put your name in a drawing. And then every Monday, I would draw a name out of the box for people that did their homework and they could earn a bag of chips or a Coke from the Coke machine or something like that. I know we have to be more careful with that now with the food things, but that's an idea of a reward. It was not in any way tied to a grade, but it was a motivation for my students to get their work done. So think about some rewards that your students might like, some punishments. You have silent lunch. You lose your not play on your own time, sorry. You lose your time when we might play a game in class. So there's some punishments that you can tie in there as well, but that is a powerful tool. It just isn't 100% of what he said it was because of not tying into account the internal motivation of the student. All right, Piaget is another one. He was in the late 1960s, and his idea was you want students to construct their own knowledge. So this was a really big deal when I was in college, which was after 1969. But all of my teachers wanted us to do guided discovery. All of our lessons should be guided discovery all the time because students should always experiment and invent their own knowledge, which is a nice idea in theory. In practice, you don't have time for that. So I did some lessons that were guided discovery. Some different activities lend themselves a little bit better to that. Some just honestly don't. I mean, my students are not going to figure out, say, the quadratic formula on their own. That they're not going to be able to come to that conclusion on their own. However, there are some things that they can figure out on their own. For example, in algebra, looking at the transformations, that's something that they can be guided towards and figuring out on their own. So it is very powerful when you can do it, but just be aware that is a time-consuming thing, and you're not going to be able to do all of your lessons that way just because of the sheer volume of the number of lessons you have to do. All right, so Howard Gardner, he wrote his books not long before I graduated from college, so this was very cutting edge when I graduated college. And to be honest with you, this one always kind of amused me a little bit because his basic premise is different people are good at different things. He just happened to use that good at different things and call it an intelligence. So some people might be, sorry, there's the bell. Some people might be good at um, physical things, and so that is an intelligence that they have. So the reason why it was considered groundbreaking is because in the past you would not have considered that an intelligence; it was just a skill, and now he's saying it's actually a type of intelligence. So basically, his idea: different people are good at different things, And so therefore, in your lessons, you should have different types of things so that regardless of what your students are good at, they can be successful with the material you're trying to give them. So you want to do things that are active for those who are learn best by being active. You want to have visuals for those who learn best visually. You want to be talking for those who learn best auditory. Like, do as many different things as you can so that whatever it is, the intelligence that your student is gifted at, you have hit that intelligence at some point over the course of your lessons. All right, Vygotsky is one that I know you guys talk about in the College of Ed, the zone of proximal development. And essentially, he said there is a limit to what your student can learn right now. So, what you want to do is you want to scaffold them as high up as they can go. And as they learn, that limit will increase. But you can't ask them to do something that's outside of their limit. So, for example, you wouldn't ask a 3-month-old to run. That is outside of their skill mix. As they get older and as you hold their hand and help them walk, they're going to get there, but you just have to give them time to get there. So he's not saying students cannot learn. He's saying that maybe right now they're not ready to learn and you need to help them get to the point where they can. So that's kind of his idea. What can you do to scaffold that student to the point where they are ready to learn the information that you have for them? All right, and the next person we want to look at today is Brunner in the early 1940s. And he had these 3 stages of development. And his idea was you have to go through the 3 stages as you learn. You can't skip. So your first one is the inactive stage. And that's where you're doing things physically with your muscles. So for example, typing or sewing, those are things that you do physically. And so that is a type of muscle memory. You may have seen this, like if you think a milk gallon is full and it's really not, your muscles will pick it up with a certain amount of force and the milk will just fly up in the air because it's not as full as you thought it was, but your muscles remember how much force to put on it as you pick it up. So that's kind of what this is talking about. The next is the iconic. You can go from that muscle memory of moving things around with your fingers to just visualizing what it looked like when you move things around with your fingers. And you don't actually have to touch and feel the things anymore. You can visualize it. Maybe you need to draw something to put that visualization on paper, but you are able to work through the things just by looking at the visualization. You don't need to actually physically do the things anymore. And then the last stage is the symbolic. So you have now gotten to the point where you can work the problem. If it was a math example, you could work the problem without having to visualize what was going on with the numbers or the symbols, that you just understand how to work it. You have done enough of the mental envisioning of the problem that you don't necessarily need that anymore, and you're ready just to work the problem using the storage ideas that you have in your mind. Well, his idea actually led to the extensive use of manipulatives, which is the last thing that we're going to talk about today.